Get out, you fucking animals! This isn't Section 8 housing! Linda Morrison explodes through her front door like a rabid beast, her face purple with rage as she storms across her manicured lawn in bedroom slippers. She stops at the property line, jabbing her finger violently at the black family's celebration. You don't belong here. Take your welfare babies and drug dealing back to the ghetto where you came from. A birthday cake sits half-cut on the table as children cower behind their parents. The black father drops his grilling spatula, his jaw clenched tight as neighbors emerge from houses to witness Linda's racist tirade. I'm calling the police to report a criminal gathering, she screams into her phone, spittle flying from her lips. These gang members are selling drugs at a children's party. The man's hands slowly ball into fists before he forces them open, his voice deadly calm. Ma'am, you need to step back. Linda's maniacal laughter echoes as sirens wail in the distance. We'll see who steps back when the cops get here, boy. Without a word, the father disappears into his garage, and Linda has no idea what's waiting inside. The morning sun casts long shadows across Willow Creek's pristine streets, where every lawn maintains the same emerald perfection and every driveway gleams with fresh sealant. At 246 Maple Drive, Chief Robert Bobby Williams kneels beside his 8-year-old daughter Zoe, carefully untangling a string of birthday balloons that will soon transform their backyard into a wonderland. Bobby's weathered hands work with surprising gentleness for someone his size. 6'2", with the broad shoulders of a man who spent 22 years maintaining order in an increasingly chaotic world. But here, in civilian clothes on a Saturday morning, he's simply a father preparing for the most important day in his little girl's year. Daddy, can we put the purple ones by the swing set? Zoe's gap-toothed smile radiates pure joy as she clutches a cluster of balloons to her chest. Her birthday dress, a frilly pink creation that Bobby's wife Maria found on sale 3 weeks ago, already bears the evidence of an 8-year-old's enthusiasm, a small grass stain on the hem and frosting from the cupcakes she tested earlier. Wherever you want them, princess. Bobby's voice carries the warm authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but here it's softened by paternal love. He secures the balloon weights with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from years of incident scene management translating seamlessly to party preparation. Across the street, morning joggers wave politely as they pass, a ritual of suburban pleasantry that Bobby has slowly grown accustomed to since moving to Willow Creek 6 months ago. The transition from their cramped apartment near downtown to this sprawling suburb represented everything he and Maria had worked toward. Good schools, safe streets, and neighbors who smiled instead of looking away. Mrs. Carter from next door emerges from her house carrying a perfectly wrapped gift, her elderly frame moving with careful deliberation. Bobby immediately rises to help her navigate the slight incline between their properties, taking her arm with the same protective instinct that makes him an exceptional police chief. You're too kind, Mr. Williams, she says in accented English, patting his hand with genuine warmth. Zoe is lucky to have such a caring father. We're the lucky ones to have neighbors like you, Mrs. Carter. Bobby's response carries no trace of the code switching that many black professionals master. His voice remains authentically his own, whether addressing his daughter or his community. The front door of 247 Maple Drive opens with deliberate force, and Linda Morrison emerges like a stage performer making an entrance. Her blonde hair sits in rigid perfection despite the early hour, and her pastel cardigan coordinates flawlessly with her pressed khakis and spotless white sneakers. Everything about her appearance screams careful construction, from her precisely applied makeup to the way she carries herself. Chin slightly raised, shoulders back, claiming space with aggressive politeness. Good morning, neighbors. Her voice projects across the street with artificial cheer, but her eyes scan Bobby's property with the calculating precision of an appraiser. My, you're certainly starting early with the festivities. The pause before festivities hangs in the air like a question mark, loaded with implications that Bobby recognizes but chooses not to acknowledge. He's encountered this tone countless times in his career, the carefully modulated voice of someone who believes their concerns deserve immediate attention and their perspective represents universal truth. Just getting ready for Zoe's birthday party this afternoon. Bobby responds evenly, continuing to secure decorations without breaking rhythm. His response carries no defensiveness, no explanation beyond the simple facts. Years of police work have taught him the power of controlled responses. Linda's smile tightens imperceptibly. I do hope you'll be mindful of the noise ordinances. We have several elderly residents on this street who value their weekend tranquility. She pauses, her gaze fixing on the portable speaker Bobby has positioned near the patio table. And of course, there are property values to consider. Mrs. Carter's grip on Bobby's arm tightens slightly, a gesture so subtle that only someone trained in reading body language would notice. But Bobby feels it, recognizes the tension that creeps into marginalized communities when authority figures speak in coded language about standards and values. Of course, Bobby replies, his tone remaining professionally neutral. We'll keep things reasonable. Just a few friends and some birthday cake. Wonderful. Linda's smile never wavers, but something predatory flickers behind her eyes. I'm sure you understand how important it is to maintain the character of our neighborhood. We've worked very hard to create something special here. Zoe tugs on Bobby's shirt, oblivious to the adult undercurrents swirling around her. Daddy, when are Marcus and Keisha coming? And will Officer Rodriguez bring her kids too? Linda's eyebrows rise sharply at the mention of multiple families, her mental calculator already tallying potential violations. How many guests are you expecting, if you don't mind me asking? Just family and close friends, Bobby answers, lifting Zoe into his arms with easy strength. Nothing elaborate. I see. Linda's gaze sweeps over their modest decorations, balloons, a small banner, folding tables borrowed from Bobby's precinct, but her expression suggests she's cataloging evidence rather than admiring party preparations. Well, I certainly hope everyone knows where to park. Street parking can become quite congested, and we wouldn't want to block anyone's driveways. Mrs. Carter finally speaks, her voice quiet but firm. The Williams family are wonderful neighbors, Mrs. Morrison. Very considerate. Linda's smile becomes even more brittle. Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm simply looking out for everyone's best interests. She adjusts her purse strap with unnecessary force. Community standards benefit us all. Bobby sets Zoe down gently, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. The gesture appears casual, but his body language subtly shifts, feet planted, shoulders squared, the unconscious stance of someone prepared to shield what matters most. We appreciate your concern, Mrs. Morrison. Everything will be handled appropriately. I'm certain it will be. Linda's tone drips with false confidence, as if she's already mentally rehearsing her next move. Enjoy your celebration. She retreats toward her house with measured steps, her posture radiating disapproval despite her polite words. As her front door closes with a decisive click, Bobby notices her living room curtains flutter, a sign that observation will continue from a distance. Mrs. Carter shakes her head sadly. Some people carry too much poison in their hearts. Bobby kneels down to Zoe's eye level, his expression softening as he focuses on what truly matters. What do you think, birthday girl? Should we finish decorating so your friends have the best party ever? Zoe's delighted squeal erases the lingering tension as she races toward the backyard, her joy infectious and pure. Bobby follows, but his peripheral vision catches the slight movement of Linda's curtains. 22 years of police work has taught him to recognize when someone is watching, waiting, planning. As the morning progresses and more decorations transform their modest backyard into a child's paradise, Bobby maintains his focus on creating magic for his daughter. But somewhere in the back of his mind, professional instincts whisper warnings about neighbors who ask too many questions and smile with too much calculation. The stage is set for an afternoon that will test everything Bobby believes about community, justice, and the thin line between peace and chaos. By noon, Linda Morrison has positioned herself at her kitchen window like a sentinel, her fingers drumming against the granite countertop as she monitors the escalating situation across the street. What began as modest birthday preparations has evolved into something that violates every principle of suburban order she holds sacred. Three cars now occupy the Williams driveway: a practical Honda sedan, a well-maintained pickup truck, and a compact SUV with soccer ball stickers on the rear window. Additional vehicles line the street, their occupants carrying covered dishes and wrapped gifts toward the backyard celebration. Linda's mental tally climbs with each arrival: 12 adults, at least 8 children, and what she perceives as an invasion of her carefully curated paradise. The portable speaker that concerned her earlier now pulses with hip-hop rhythms that drift across her manicured lawn, each bass note registering as a personal assault on her weekend tranquility. When children's laughter mingles with the music, Linda's jaw tightens until her molars ache. She retrieves her iPhone from the charger and opens the voice memo app, her thumb hovering over the record button. Documentation has always been her strength. As an insurance adjuster, she's learned that details matter, that the right evidence presented properly can shift any narrative in her favor. Saturday, May 15th, 12:47 p.m., she dictates in her most professional tone. Ongoing disturbance at 246 Maple Drive. Excessive noise, overcrowding, multiple vehicles blocking street access. Clear violation of neighborhood covenants and city ordinances. Through the window, she watches Bobby Williams flip hamburgers on a small grill while animated conversations flow around him in both English and Spanish. When a young Latina woman arrives with 2 teenagers and a casserole dish, Linda's suspicions crystallize into certainty. Additional subjects arriving, she continued recording, appear to be gang-affiliated based on clothing and vehicle modifications, potential drug activity masked as family gathering. The truth, visible to any objective observer, tells a completely different story. Bobby's guests represent the diverse fabric of modern policing. Officer Maria Rodriguez from the gang unit brings her teenagers and homemade enchiladas. Detective James Park arrives with his wife and twin daughters. Sergeant Williams from Bobby's old precinct carries a case of sodas and war stories. These are colleagues, friends, chosen family celebrating a little girl's birthday with genuine affection and respect. But Linda sees only confirmation of her worst fears. Too many brown faces, too much comfort, too little deference to the unspoken rules that should govern their upscale enclave. At 1:15 p.m., her breaking point arrives when 8-year-old Zoe Williams shrieks with delight as water balloons explode in the backyard. The sound pierces through Linda's kitchen window like fingernails on a chalkboard, and her carefully maintained composure finally shatters. She grabs her phone and dials 911 with the practiced efficiency of someone who's made this call before. 911 Emergency Services. What's your emergency? Linda modulates her voice to project maximum distress, allowing a tremor to creep into her words. This is Linda Morrison at 247 Maple Drive in Willow Creek. I need police assistance immediately. What's the nature of your emergency, ma'am? There's a large gathering of suspicious individuals at my neighbor's house. They're being extremely loud and aggressive, and I'm concerned for the safety of our neighborhood. Linda's eyes track Bobby's movement as he helps elderly Mrs. Carter to a chair in the shade. To her, his solicitous attention appears calculated, predatory. Are you witnessing any criminal activity, ma'am? Linda's hesitation lasts only a fraction of a second. Yes, I believe so. There are too many people for a normal gathering, and they're acting threatening. I've seen what looks like drug exchanges, and the music is so loud it's clearly designed to mask other activities. Across the street, 10-year-old Marcus Williams shows his younger cousins how to throw a football, their coaching session punctuated by encouragement and high fives. Linda interprets the physical contact as gang signs, the raised voices as aggression. Ma'am, I need you to be specific. What exactly are you seeing that suggests criminal activity? They're trespassing on multiple properties, Linda improvises, watching as a child's ball rolls toward the Carter's yard and Bobby retrieves it. The male subject appears to be the ringleader. He's directing others and making threatening gestures. The 911 operator's keyboard clicks steadily as she logs the complaint. And you feel you're in immediate danger? Absolutely, Linda's voice rises with manufactured panic. These people have no respect for our community standards. They're probably selling drugs to children and using the party as cover. I've seen this before. These types move into good neighborhoods and bring crime with them. Ma'am, we're dispatching units to investigate. Please stay inside your home and do not engage with the subjects. Thank God, Linda breathes, allowing relief to color her voice. Finally, someone who understands what decent people face every day. She ends the call and immediately opens her iPhone's camera, positioning herself at the window for optimal surveillance angles. Every interaction becomes evidence in her narrative. Bobby's confident posture reads as arrogance. His guests' animated conversations suggest conspiracy. The children's exuberant play indicates lack of proper supervision. When Bobby lifts Zoe onto his shoulders so she can hang streamers from a tree branch, Linda captures the moment with vindictive satisfaction. Male subject using child to access elevated positions, she dictates. Possible surveillance or drug concealment activity. At 1:32 p.m., the first patrol car appears at the end of Maple Drive, followed quickly by two others. Linda's pulse quickens with anticipation as the vehicles approach, their presence validating every complaint, every concern, every carefully constructed narrative she's built around her neighbor's simple celebration. She positions herself at her front door, prepared to emerge as the concerned citizen whose vigilance protects community values from the chaos that threatens to consume them. Her hand rests on the doorknob, wedding ring catching the afternoon light, as she prepares to watch justice restore order to her perfect neighborhood. Across the street, Bobby Williams notices the approaching sirens with the alertness of someone whose profession demands constant awareness. But he has no way of knowing that his daughter's birthday party has just become the centerpiece of someone else's twisted narrative about race, belonging, and the price of existing while black in spaces designed to exclude him. The collision between Linda's manufactured crisis and Bobby's innocent celebration is now inevitable. The first siren cuts through the afternoon air like a blade through silk, its distant wail barely audible beneath the children's laughter and the gentle thrum of birthday celebration music. But Bobby Williams hears it immediately. His 22 years in law enforcement have trained his ears to detect trouble long before it announces itself. He freezes mid-flip of a hamburger patty, his head tilting slightly as he tracks the sound's direction and proximity. The guests continue their conversations, unaware of the approaching disruption, but Bobby's entire demeanor shifts with predatory alertness. His shoulders straighten, his feet shift to a balanced stance, and his eyes begin scanning the perimeter of his property with the methodical precision of someone assessing threat levels. "Uncle Bobby, when do we get cake?" 10-year-old Marcus tugs at Bobby's arm, his face smeared with barbecue sauce and his energy boundless despite an hour of non-stop play. The boy's innocent question barely registers as Bobby's attention focuses on the growing symphony of sirens, now clearly multiple vehicles, their harmonized wailing growing louder with each passing second. Maria Williams emerges from the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh lemonade, her nurse's intuition immediately detecting the tension radiating from her husband's rigid posture. "Bobby, what is it?" "Sirens," he replies quietly, not wanting to alarm the children but unable to dismiss the growing certainty that their peaceful celebration is about to be shattered. "Multiple units. Coming this way." Officer Maria Rodriguez, off-duty and relaxed in civilian clothes, catches Bobby's tone and automatically straightens, her own professional instincts engaging. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. Bobby sets down his grilling tongs with deliberate care, his movements becoming economical and purposeful. Still about 2 minutes out. The change in atmosphere is subtle but unmistakable. The adults begin unconsciously gravitating toward their children, conversations becoming quieter, laughter less spontaneous. Even without understanding the specifics, everyone senses that something is wrong. 8-year-old Zoe appears at Bobby's side, her birthday crown slightly askew and her face flushed with excitement from the afternoon's festivities. "Daddy, why do you look worried? Did somebody get hurt?" Bobby kneels down to her eye level, his large hands gentle as he adjusts her crown. This moment, his daughter's concerned face, her trust absolute and unquestioning, crystallizes everything at stake. No baby, nobody's hurt. Sometimes police have to drive fast to help people, that's all. But even as he reassures his daughter, Bobby's mind races through possibilities. Domestic violence calls generate this kind of response. Armed robberies, gang activity, major accidents. His mental Rolodex of emergency scenarios provides no logical explanation for multiple units converging on their quiet suburban street during a children's birthday party. The sirens grow louder, their urgent call now impossible to ignore. Several neighbors emerge from their houses, drawn by the unusual commotion in their typically peaceful enclave. Mrs. Carter appears on her front porch, clutching her sweater despite the warm afternoon, her weathered face creased with concern. Detective James Park sets down his plate of potato salad, his expression grim as the sound crescendos. "Chief, this doesn't feel random." "No, it doesn't." Bobby's voice carries the calm authority that has guided him through 2 decades of crisis management, but his eyes reflect a growing understanding of what's about to unfold. He's been black in America too long to believe in coincidences when police converge on spaces where he's simply trying to exist. 12-year-old Destiny Rodriguez stops mid-conversation with Zoe, her young face already showing signs of the wariness that black and brown children develop too early. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Before Maria Rodriguez can answer, the first patrol car appears at the end of Maple Drive, its red and blue lights painting the pristine suburban landscape in urgent colors. A second vehicle follows immediately, then a third, their synchronized arrival suggesting coordination rather than coincidence. Bobby straightens to his full height, his hands visible and his posture non-threatening despite the authority that radiates from his bearing. 22 years of wearing the badge has taught him exactly how these encounters unfold, but 22 years of being black has taught him that the badge means nothing when you're on the wrong side of someone else's narrative. "Everyone stay calm," he says quietly, his voice carrying to every guest without apparent effort. "Keep the children close, hands visible, no sudden movements." The transformation is immediate and heartbreaking. Laughter dies mid-sentence. Music that moments before provided joyful background suddenly seems inappropriately loud. Adults instinctively position themselves between the approaching vehicles and their children, muscle memory from too many similar situations overriding the logic that should protect innocent birthday celebrations. Maria Williams moves to Bobby's side, her presence both supportive and protective. "Should I turn off the music?" "Not yet. Let them see exactly what this is. A child's birthday party with family and friends." Bobby's strategic thinking kicks into overdrive. Documentation, witnesses, evidence of normalcy, all crucial if this situation escalates beyond reasonable police procedure. The lead patrol car slows as it approaches their house, followed by 2 others in carefully orchestrated formation. Through the windshield, Bobby can see the officers scanning the scene, their body language alert but not yet aggressive. Professional assessment rather than tactical response, at least initially. Zoe tugs on Bobby's shirt, her 8-year-old voice cutting through the tension with devastating innocence. "Daddy, why are the police cars pretty colors? Are they here for my birthday too?" The question stops Bobby's breath for a moment. His daughter lives in a world where police represent safety and protection, where flashing lights might herald celebration rather than persecution. Her innocence, still intact despite the harsh realities that shape too many young lives, represents everything he's fought to preserve and everything that's about to be tested. "Maybe, baby girl, maybe they just want to make sure everyone's safe at your party." But even as he comforts his daughter, Bobby's eyes track the approaching vehicles and the neighbors beginning to emerge from their houses. Across the street, Linda Morrison's front door opens slowly, her figure appearing like a theater curtain rising on the drama she's orchestrated. The first officer exits his vehicle, hand resting casually on his duty belt, his expression professionally neutral as he surveys the scene. Children with balloons and birthday hats, adults with plates of food, decorations fluttering in the afternoon breeze, nothing that remotely suggests the emergency that brought 3 patrol cars to this quiet suburban street. Bobby steps forward slightly, his movement deliberate and measured, positioning himself as the primary contact while keeping his family safely behind him. Years of leadership have prepared him for moments when clarity and calm can determine whether situations escalate or de-escalate. But this time, the stakes are personal in ways that no training manual can address. The gap between the approaching officers and Bobby's backyard celebration narrows with each step, carrying with it the weight of systemic biases, manufactured emergencies, and the collision between one man's peaceful existence and another person's racial paranoia. Whatever happens next will test not just Bobby's professionalism, but the very foundations of justice he's spent his career defending. 3 patrol cars arrange themselves in a tactical formation that transforms Maple Drive from suburban sanctuary into interrogation theater. Officers emerge with practiced synchronization, hands positioned near weapons, eyes scanning for threats that exist only in Linda Morrison's carefully constructed narrative. Officer Jake Martinez, a 5-year veteran with biceps that strain his uniform sleeves, takes point as he approaches Bobby's front yard. His partner, Officer Sarah Carter, no relation to the elderly neighbor, flanks left while a third officer maintains position near the vehicles. Their body language suggests routine investigation rather than immediate threat assessment, but the implicit show of force sends its intended message to every guest at the birthday party. Linda Morrison explodes from her house like a prosecutor presenting opening arguments to a jury, her pastel cardigan somehow armor-plated with righteous indignation. She strides across her lawn with theatrical urgency, pointing at Bobby with the accusatory precision of someone who's rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times. "Officers! Thank God you're here!" Her voice projects across the street with operatic volume, ensuring that every neighbor, every child, every guest becomes an audience for her performance. "That man has been terrorizing our neighborhood all afternoon." Bobby maintains his position near the grill, his hands visible and his posture deliberately non-threatening despite every instinct screaming at him to protect his family from the unfolding nightmare. Years of police training war with decades of being black as he calculates responses, exit strategies, and the devastating reality that his daughter's birthday party has become someone else's racist fantasy. Officer Martinez approaches the property line, his expression professionally neutral as he addresses Bobby. "Sir, we received a complaint about a disturbance. Mind if we have a quick word?" "Of course, officer." Bobby's voice carries the measured calm of someone accustomed to authority, but his eyes never leave the approaching officers as Maria gathers the children closer to the house. "What kind of disturbance?" Linda's voice cuts across the lawn like breaking glass. "Noise violations, public intoxication, possible drug activity disguised as a children's party." Each accusation escalates in volume and venom, her finger jabbing at Bobby like a weapon. He's been aggressive and threatening toward multiple neighbors. Officer Carter surveys the scene with growing confusion. Balloons tied to fence posts, a modest grill with hamburgers, children in birthday hats clutching juice boxes. Her radio crackles with background chatter about domestic disputes and traffic accidents, real emergencies that demand police attention rather than this suburban theater. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez addresses Bobby while keeping Linda in his peripheral vision, "can you tell me what kind of gathering this is?" "My daughter's 8th birthday party," Bobby responds evenly, gesturing toward Zoe, who peeks out from behind her mother's legs. "Family and friends. We've been here since noon." "He's lying!" Linda's voice reaches a fever pitch that causes several children to flinch. "I've been monitoring suspicious activity all day, multiple subjects arriving in unmarked vehicles, loud music designed to mask illegal transactions, children being used as cover for criminal enterprise." Mrs. Carter emerges from her house despite her advanced age, her voice quavering but determined. "Officers, the Williams family are wonderful neighbors. There's been no disturbance except this woman's shouting. She's been compromised." Linda whirls toward the elderly woman with manic intensity. "They probably threatened her into compliance." This is exactly how these criminal organizations operate: intimidation and false narratives. The accusations pile upon each other like toxic debris, each claim more outrageous than the last. Officer Martinez's training manual never covered situations where birthday parties become criminal conspiracies in the mind of a caller, where children's laughter transforms into evidence of gang activity through the lens of racial paranoia. Officer Sarah Carter steps forward with diplomatic precision. "Sir, do you have identification? And can you provide a guest list for today's gathering?" Bobby nods calmly, reaching slowly toward his back pocket. "Of course, my driver's license is right here. Don't let him reach for anything." Linda's shriek pierces the afternoon air with the desperation of someone whose narrative is beginning to crumble. "He could have weapons. Gang members always carry weapons." The officers tense at Linda's outburst. hands instinctively moving toward their duty belts as Bobby freezes with his hand halfway to his wallet. The moment crystallizes into dangerous possibility. One wrong movement, one nervous reaction, one split-second misinterpretation could transform a birthday party into a tragedy that makes national news. "Sir, please move very slowly," Officer Martinez instructs, his voice professional but tight with sudden tension. Bobby complies with exaggerated deliberation, his movements precise and telegraphed as he extracts his wallet. But as he opens it to reveal his driver's license, Linda's voice cuts through the air with vindictive triumph. "Look at his body language! Look how he's positioning himself! That's tactical awareness! He's obviously had military or gang training!" She turns to the officers with conspiracy-laden intensity. "Check his record! I guarantee he has prior arrests, probably weapons charges, definitely drug-related offenses." The third officer, a rookie named David Kowalski, whose nervous energy betrays his inexperience, speaks up from his position near the patrol cars. "Should we request backup for a potential gang investigation?" Linda's eyes light up with vindictive satisfaction. "Yes! Finally someone with common sense! This whole street could be compromised!" Officer Martinez shoots his rookie colleague a warning look. "Let's assess the situation first, Kowalski." But Linda pounces on the rookie's suggestion like a predator sensing wounded prey. "Officer, I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years. I know when something doesn't belong. These people moved in 6 months ago and immediately the character of our community started changing. Property values dropping, strange cars at all hours, loud parties every weekend." "Ma'am, this appears to be the first party we've been called to," Officer Carter interjects, consulting her notepad. "There's no record of previous complaints about this address." "Because you people don't take suburban safety seriously." Linda's voice reaches new levels of hysteria, her careful composure completely abandoned. "You wait until someone gets shot, until children get corrupted by drug dealers, until decent families are driven from their homes by these criminals." 8-year-old Zoe begins to cry, her birthday joy dissolving into confusion and fear as the woman across the street screams accusations at her father. The sound of his daughter's distress cracks Bobby's professional composure for just a moment. His jaw tightens, his shoulders square, and something dangerous flickers behind his eyes. "Ma'am, you need to calm down." Officer Carter addresses Linda with growing irritation. "We're conducting an investigation." "Investigation? This is a raid! This is exactly what these people deserve." Linda's voice reaches hysteric proportions, her careful suburban facade disintegrating into raw bigotry. "They move into our neighborhoods, they bring their violence and their drugs and their ghetto mentality, and then they act like victims when decent people try to protect their families." Detective James Park steps forward from the group of guests, his off-duty status irrelevant to his protective instincts. "Officers, I'm Detective Park with the County Sheriff's Department. This is a birthday party for an 8-year-old girl." Linda's face contorts with rage at this new information. "More lies, more cover-up! They're all working together!" She points at the diverse group of guests with manic accusations. "Look at them! Different gangs coordinating territory, using children as human shields!" Officer Martinez's patience begins to fray as Linda's accusations become increasingly unhinged. "Ma'am, can you be specific about what illegal activity you've actually witnessed?" "Everything. The loud music, the multiple vehicles, the suspicious conversations in foreign languages." Linda's desperation grows as her narrative fails to convince the responding officers. "And look at him. Look how calm he is. That's guilt. That's deception." Bobby's wallet remains open in his hands, his driver's license clearly visible, but he makes no move to hand it over while Linda's accusations fly around him like bullets. 22 years of wearing a badge have taught him that sometimes patience and professionalism can diffuse situations that aggression would only escalate. "Officers," he says quietly, his voice cutting through Linda's hysteria with measured authority. "I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding about the nature of today's gathering." "There's no misunderstanding," Linda screams, her composure completely shattered. "You don't belong here! Take your criminal friends and get out of our neighborhood before someone gets hurt!" Officer Kowalski, emboldened by Linda's passionate testimony, steps forward with rookie enthusiasm. "Sir, we're going to need you to disperse this gathering immediately while we investigate these allegations." "Kowalski," Officer Martinez warns, but the damage is done. Bobby's expression shifts imperceptibly, the change so subtle that only someone trained in reading body language would notice, but unmistakable to those who recognize the moment when patience transforms into something harder, more dangerous. The raw racism of Linda's outburst hangs in the air like a physical presence, shocking even the officers who've responded to her call. Children stop crying to stare at the woman whose hatred has just exploded across their innocent celebration, while adults instinctively move to shield young eyes from the ugliness of adult prejudice. Maria Williams appears at Bobby's shoulder, her presence both supportive and protective, while Zoe clings to her mother's leg with the desperate grip of a child whose world has suddenly become incomprehensible and threatening. Bobby looks at his terrified daughter, then at his guests. Good people who came to celebrate childhood joy only to witness the systematic harassment that too many families endure simply for existing in spaces where their presence challenges someone's vision of racial purity. The weight of the moment settles on his shoulders like a familiar burden. The exhaustion of being perpetually guilty until proven innocent, of having every gesture scrutinized for signs of threat, of watching his child learn too early that her father's skin color makes him suspect in the eyes of neighbors who smile politely while harboring poisonous assumptions. "I think," he says with deadly calm, "it's time for some clarification." Without another word, Bobby turns toward his garage, Linda's continued screaming fading into background noise as he walks with purpose toward a revelation that will redefine every assumption, every accusation, and every prejudice that brought 3 patrol cars to his daughter's birthday party. The garage door rises with mechanical precision, its steady hum cutting through Linda Morrison's hysterical accusations like a blade through static. Every eye, officer and civilian alike, fixes on the widening gap that reveals the interior of Bobby Williams's garage with documentary clarity. What emerges stops time. Bobby steps into the afternoon sunlight wearing the full dress uniform of the Willow Creek Police Department, complete with the gold-braided insignia that marks him as chief of police. The badge catches the Texas sun like a mirror, its polished surface reflecting 22 years of service, countless commendations, and the absolute authority that transforms every assumption Linda Morrison has built her racist narrative upon. The effect is instantaneous and devastating. Linda's mouth opens and closes like a fish drowning in air, her pointing finger freezing mid-accusation as her brain struggles to process the impossible sight before her. The woman who moments ago screamed about gang members and criminals now faces the horrifying realization that she has just spent 30 minutes calling the police to report the police chief celebrating his daughter's birthday. Officer Martinez snaps to attention with military precision, his hand moving to his cap in an automatic salute. "Chief Williams!" His voice carries across the yard with the respect and recognition that instantly redefines every power dynamic in play. Officer Carter follows suit immediately, her posture straightening as years of police hierarchy override her confusion about the situation. Even Rookie Kowalski, who moments ago threatened to disperse the gathering, now stands at attention with wide-eyed recognition of his superior officer. "Good afternoon, officers," Bobby says with the calm authority of someone accustomed to command, his voice carrying no trace of anger despite the indignities he's just endured. "I believe we need to discuss the nature of this emergency call. The transformation is complete and absolute. The suspected gang leader becomes the chief law enforcement officer for their entire jurisdiction. The threatening criminal becomes the man whose signature appears on every commendation, every promotion, every policy that governs how police interact with their community." Linda staggers backward as if physically struck, her face cycling through confusion, horror, and dawning comprehension of the magnitude of her mistake. The woman who built her identity around protecting suburban values from dangerous outsiders has just discovered that the most dangerous person on Maple Drive exists only in her own poisoned imagination. "Sir," Officer Martinez struggles with the awkwardness of addressing his chief while surrounded by the evidence of Linda's false accusations. "We responded to a complaint about suspected criminal activity." Bobby's gaze sweeps over his officers with professional assessment, then shifts to Linda with the measured attention of someone studying a fascinating specimen of human behavior. "I see. And what specific criminal activity did you observe upon arrival, Officer Martinez?" A children's birthday party, sir, with what appears to be family and friends celebrating in a backyard setting. Martinez's report carries the careful neutrality of someone realizing that his day has become significantly more complicated. Interesting. Bobby's tone remains conversational, but something underneath suggests that this conversation will be remembered and documented. And the complainant's specific allegations? Officer Carter consults her notes with visible discomfort. Noise violations, suspected drug activity, gang gathering, and threats to neighborhood safety, sir. The silence that follows her recitation carries the weight of institutional reckoning. Every guest, every neighbor, every child understands that they are witnessing the moment when systemic racism collides with actual authority, when manufactured fear meets professional competence. Bobby's attention turns to Linda, who seems to shrink with each passing second. Ma'am, I believe you called 911 to report suspicious activity at this address? Linda's voice comes out as a barely audible whisper. I didn't know. I thought. You thought what exactly? Bobby's question carries the patient tone of someone conducting an official investigation, but the steel underneath suggests that her answer will have consequences far beyond this embarrassing moment. I thought there was the noise. Linda's carefully constructed narrative crumbles like a house built on sand, each word revealing the fundamental emptiness of her accusations. Detective Park steps forward from the group of guests, his shield now visible on his belt. Chief, several of us can provide testimony about the complainant's specific statements and behavior over the past hour. Thank you, Detective. I'm sure that will be helpful. Bobby's acknowledgement carries the weight of formal procedure beginning, the transformation of a personal harassment into an official investigation. Officer Rodriguez emerges from the crowd of guests, her own badge visible. Sir, the complainant made specific allegations about gang activity and drug dealing, with particular emphasis on the racial composition of your guests. The documentation phase has begun, and Linda Morrison finally understands that her day of playing neighborhood vigilante has evolved into something far more serious. The police chief she tried to have arrested is now conducting an official investigation into her abuse of emergency services, and every word she's screamed for the past hour exists as evidence against her. Young Zoe Williams peers around her mother's legs, her birthday crown still perched on her head as she tries to understand why the mean lady across the street looks so scared. Daddy, why is everyone being so quiet now? Bobby kneels down to his daughter's level, his uniform crisp and official, but his voice soft with paternal love. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Princess, and sometimes those mistakes have to be fixed. He rises and addresses his officers with the authority that has guided his department through countless crises. Officers, I want a complete report on today's incident filed by end of shift. Include the complainant's specific allegations, the response protocols followed, and any witness statements you can gather. Yes, sir. Martinez responds, already mentally drafting the report that will become part of Linda Morrison's permanent record. Linda finally finds her voice, desperation replacing her earlier bravado. Chief Williams, sir, I didn't mean, I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Bobby's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes suggests that protection means something entirely different to him than it does to her. Ma'am, I suggest you contact a lawyer. Abuse of emergency services carries significant penalties, and false reporting can result in both civil and criminal liability. The woman who spent her afternoon playing judge, jury, and executioner now faces the reality of actual justice, administered by the man she tried to destroy with lies and racial prejudice. As neighbors begin emerging from their houses with phones raised, documenting this unprecedented reversal of fortune, Bobby Williams stands in his driveway. No longer a suspected criminal, but revealed as the chief law enforcement officer whose authority will determine how this story ends. The first phone had started recording before the garage door fully opened, but by the time Bobby Williams emerged in his police chief uniform, at least 7 different devices were capturing the moment from multiple angles. Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down live-streamed directly to Facebook. Teenage neighbor Marcus Johnson uploaded to TikTok with shaking hands. Even elderly Mr. Rodriguez, who rarely used his smartphone beyond phone calls, instinctively knew this moment demanded documentation. Within 90 seconds of Bobby's reveal, the first video hit social media with the caption, Racist Karen calls cops on police chief's daughter's birthday party # Willow Creek chief #. Karen's gone wild # justice served. The algorithmic gods of viral content smiled upon the footage. Everything about the incident struck social media gold. Clear audio capturing Linda's racist tirade, crystal clear video of Bobby's authoritative emergence in full uniform, and the priceless moment when Linda's face cycled through confusion, horror, and dawning humiliation. The visual contrast between her hysterical accusations and his calm professionalism created content that practically demanded to be shared. By 3:47 p.m., barely 25 minutes after the confrontation, #Willow Creek Chief was trending on Twitter. The hashtag accumulated 1,700 mentions in the first hour as the video spread across platforms like digital wildfire. Instagram stories, Facebook posts, TikTok reactions, and Reddit threads multiplied exponentially, each repost adding layers of commentary, analysis, and social justice vindication. Twitter exploded with real-time reactions that captured the raw emotion of witnessing instant karma. Bruh, I cannot with this level of satisfaction. Imagine calling the police on the police chief because you're racist. Received 23,000 likes and 8,400 retweets within 2 hours. The responses split along predictable but passionate lines, creating virtual battlegrounds in comment sections across every platform. Progressive voices rallied with vindicated fury. This is what systemic racism looks like. Karen literally called the police to complain about the police chief existing while black. Share this everywhere. The tweet garnered 12,000 retweets within 2 hours, spawning thousands of quote tweets, adding personal experiences with similar harassment. Counter-narratives emerged almost immediately from conservative social media ecosystems. Context matters. We don't know what really happened before the camera started rolling. This looks staged for social media clout. #fake news, #setup, #media manipulation. These defensive posts accumulated their own engagement, creating parallel conversations that questioned the incident's authenticity while avoiding its obvious racial dynamics. But the raw footage spoke for itself with devastating clarity. Linda Morrison's voice, captured with documentary precision, provided undeniable audio evidence of racial bias masquerading as community concern. Her specific language, "those people," "ghetto mentality," "don't belong here," and the particularly damaging "take your criminal friends and get out," became quotable evidence of the coded racism that communities of color navigate daily. Instagram influencers with massive followings began posting reaction videos within hours. Maya Rodriguez, a lifestyle influencer with 890,000 followers, posted a 15-minute Instagram live session breaking down the incident. Y'all, this is why we keep saying that being successful, being educated, being a literal police chief doesn't protect you from racism. This man was grilling burgers for his baby girl and had to endure this woman's hatred just for existing in his own backyard. Local news stations picked up the story by 5 p.m., their evening newsroom meetings completely restructured around the viral phenomenon occurring in their coverage area. KXN Austin led their 6 p.m. broadcast with Willow Creek Police Chief targeted by racist 911 call at daughter's birthday party. The reporter stood outside Bobby's house, where birthday decorations still fluttered in the evening breeze, their innocent celebration now transformed into symbols of resistance against systemic harassment. This afternoon, what should have been a joyful family celebration became a textbook example of how racial profiling impacts even those in positions of authority, the reporter intoned with practiced gravity. Chief Robert Williams, a 22-year veteran of law enforcement, found himself subjected to the very bias he's sworn to protect others from. The story resonated far beyond Texas geography and time zones. CNN picked it up for their 8 p.m. primetime segment on racial bias in suburbia, featuring the incident as part of a broader discussion about weaponized 911 calls. MSNBC used it as a launching point for panel discussions about coded language and modern racism. Fox News covered it with careful neutrality, focusing on the misunderstanding and community tensions rather than Linda's explicitly racist statements. Social media reaction videos proliferated throughout the evening like digital wildfire. A TikTok creator with 2.3 million followers spent 8 minutes methodically breaking down Linda's body language and verbal patterns. Watch how she retreats when she realizes her mistake, but notice She never actually apologizes. She doesn't say, "I'm sorry," even once. That's white fragility in real time, y'all. The immediate victim complex instead of accountability. YouTube commentary channels seize the content with entrepreneurial enthusiasm. Racist Karen gets owned by police chief, instant karma compilation #47, accumulated 89,000 views in 6 hours, with reaction videos spawning their own ecosystem of content creation. Gaming streamers paused their broadcasts to watch the footage. Podcast hosts recorded emergency episodes analyzing the incident's broader implications. But the viral explosion cut both ways, creating digital collateral damage alongside social justice vindication. Linda Morrison's supporters rallied with defensive fury that matched the progressive outrage in intensity, if not in numbers. This woman was trying to protect her neighborhood. Since when is calling police about suspicious activity considered racist? This is PC culture gone completely mad. Their comments flooded social media platforms with alternative narratives, claims of reverse racism, and demands for Linda's vindication against what they characterized as liberal media persecution. A Facebook group called Support Linda Morrison, Neighborhood Hero, gained 3,200 members overnight, their posts painting her as a victim of liberal media manipulation, a concerned citizen persecuted for exercising her constitutional rights, and a symbol of suburban values under attack by political correctness run amok. Group administrators shared Linda's insurance office information, encouraging supporters to patronize her business as a form of solidarity against cancel culture. The doxing began inevitably, despite platform community guidelines prohibiting such information sharing. Linda's home address, personal phone number, work schedule, and insurance office location spread across platforms faster than moderators could remove them. Her employer's Facebook page filled with hundreds of angry reviews demanding her immediate termination, while others flooded it with 5-star reviews defending her right to protect her community. Linda's children, both adults with their own social media presence, found themselves targeted by strangers convinced that racism was hereditary. Her daughter's Instagram comments are filled with accusations and demands that she denounce her mother publicly. Her son's LinkedIn profile received messages from colleagues questioning his family's values and their potential impact on his professional credibility. Bobby Williams, meanwhile, maintained professional silence while chaos swirled around his family like a digital tornado. His department's phone lines were jammed with calls from national reporters, civil rights activists, conservative commentators, and ordinary citizens demanding statements, investigations, policy changes, and his perspective on the incident. The mayor's office called 6 times requesting immediate emergency meetings to discuss crisis management and potential political fallout. The city attorney wanted to discuss litigation strategies, both defensive and offensive. Civil rights organizations were already researching Linda Morrison's complaint history and examining potential patterns of harassment disguised as concerned citizenship. Conservative legal foundations reached out offering to defend Linda against what they characterized as politically motivated persecution. Maria Williams watched their quiet suburban life transform into a national talking point while simultaneously trying to shield 8-year-old Zoe from the intensity of public attention and explain why strangers on the internet were discussing their family. "Mommy, why are people so angry about my birthday party? Did I do something wrong?" became a question that no parenting manual adequately prepared her to answer with age-appropriate honesty. By Sunday morning, the story had achieved international reach that transcended American racial politics. British tabloids ran headlines like, "American police chief faces shocking racist attack at daughter's birthday celebration." German news outlets used the incident to illustrate broader American racial tensions for European audiences. Social media discussions in Spanish, French, Mandarin, and Arabic debated the incident's implications for understanding systemic racism in democratic societies. The video spawned countless memes that reduced complex social justice issues to shareable content. Linda's shocked expression when Bobby emerged in uniform became a reaction GIF captioned, "When you realize you messed with the wrong one." Bobby's calm emergence in full dress uniform transformed into motivational posters about quiet confidence overcoming loud ignorance, wisdom defeating weaponized stupidity. But beneath the viral entertainment and meme culture lay serious institutional consequences that would outlast social media attention spans. The Willow Creek Police Department faced unprecedented scrutiny about their response protocols, bias training, and community relations strategies. How many other residents had filed similar racially motivated complaints? Were there documented patterns of harassment disguised as concerned citizenship that the department had failed to address systematically? Internal Affairs announced a comprehensive review of all 911 calls originating from the Willow Creek subdivision over the previous 24 months. Civil rights organizations demanded immediate access to Linda Morrison's complete complaint history and any internal communications about previous incidents. Legal experts across news networks debated whether her demonstrably false reporting rose to the level of criminal charges versus civil liability, and what precedent her case might set for similar incidents nationwide. Monday morning arrived at the Willow Creek Police Department like a reckoning disguised as routine. Chief Bobby Williams entered his office at 6:47 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual, to find 17 urgent messages from the mayor, 43 interview requests from media outlets, and a stack of incident reports that would redefine his understanding of systematic harassment. The viral storm had subsided enough for actual police work to begin, but the questions it raised demanded answers that extended far beyond one racist neighbor's Saturday afternoon meltdown. Bobby's decades of law enforcement experience told him that Linda Morrison's behavior represented a pattern, not an isolated incident, and patterns required investigation. Detective Sarah Carter arrived at 7:15 a.m. carrying 3 banker's boxes and a look of grim determination, no relation to elderly Mrs. Carter from Bobby's neighborhood. Detective Carter had spent her Sunday voluntarily combing through departmental records, driven by the professional instinct that Saturday's incident was merely the visible tip of a much larger iceberg. "Chief, we need to talk," she said, setting the boxes on his conference table with the careful precision of someone handling evidence. "I pulled every 911 call originating from the Willow Creek subdivision over the past 18 months. What I found is disturbing." Bobby poured himself coffee from the pot he'd started brewing 20 minutes earlier, his movements deliberate as he prepared for revelations he suspected would challenge his faith in the system he'd devoted his career to serving. How disturbing? Detective Carter opened the first box, revealing meticulously organized files color-coded by incident type and caller identity. Red folders marked emergency responses, yellow indicated noise complaints, blue represented suspicious activity reports, and green documented follow-up investigations. The overwhelming majority wore red tabs. Linda Morrison has made 47,911 calls since January of last year. 47 calls, Chief. That's an average of 2.6 calls per month from one address in a neighborhood that previously generated maybe 6 police calls annually for the entire subdivision. She spread the files across the conference table like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a grand jury. Each folder contained audio transcripts, response logs, incident summaries, and officer notes that painted a picture of systematic abuse of emergency services disguised as concerned citizenship. "Tell me about the pattern," Bobby said, settling into his chair with the focused attention he reserved for major case briefings. "Every single call involves people of color," Detective Carter reported, consulting her handwritten analysis notes that represented 12 hours of meticulous documentation. 23 calls about black residents, 16 about Latino families, 5 about Asian households, and 3 about families she couldn't clearly identify ethnically but described as foreign-looking or Middle Eastern types. Bobby's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. 47 calls. 0 about white residents. 0. Not one complaint about noise, parking, or suspicious activity involving white neighbors. But she's called about birthday parties, graduation celebrations, family barbecues, children playing basketball in driveways, teenagers washing cars, elderly residents gardening in their own yards, and families walking their dogs through the subdivision. Detective Carter's voice carried the controlled anger of someone who'd spent 12 hours documenting institutional failure. The second box contained audio transcripts that read like a masterclass in coded racism. Linda Morrison's language evolved over 18 months from subtle implications to explicit bias, each call building on the previous one's success in generating police responses to ordinary activities of daily life for families of color. January 15th of last year, Detective Carter read from the earliest transcript. There's suspicious activity at 312 Oak Street. Multiple vehicles, loud music, people coming and going at all hours. Response: 2 units dispatched. Found the Ramirez family celebrating their grandmother's 70th birthday with 3 generations of relatives. March 8th. Possible drug activity at 428 Pine Drive. Young men gather in the garage, exchange packages, lookouts posted. Response: officers discovered the Thompson teenagers working on a car restoration project with their father, a mechanic teaching his son's auto repair skills. May 22nd. Trespassing and theft in progress at 156 Maple Circle. Subjects accessing property without permission, removing items. Response: officers found the Kim family's adult children helping their parents move furniture as they renovated their living room. Bobby reviewed the files with growing incredulity. Each incident report documented police resources deployed to investigate ordinary family life, neighborhood gatherings, and routine activities that became suspicious only when filtered through Linda Morrison's racial paranoia. The pattern revealed itself with mathematical precision. Normal activities performed by white families generated no calls, while identical activities performed by families of color triggered emergency responses. The escalation is systematic, Detective Carter continued, pulling out a timeline she'd constructed. Early calls used vague language about suspicious activity and unusual gatherings. By summer, she's alleging specific crimes like drug dealing and gang activity. By fall, she's claiming to witness weapons, threats to community safety, and organized criminal enterprises. And our response? Bobby asked, though he suspected the answer would implicate his entire department in systematic racial harassment. We responded to every call, every single one. Detective Carter's admission carried the weight of institutional complicity that would haunt his department for years. Officers followed standard protocol, investigated thoroughly, filed complete reports, and found no evidence of criminal activity in 46 of 47 cases. The one exception was a noise violation issued during the Martinez family's quinceañera that went past 10 p.m. on a Saturday, a celebration that white families regularly held without complaint or police contact. The third box contained the most damning evidence: internal communications between officers, dispatchers, and supervisors about Linda Morrison's calls. Email chains revealed growing frustration with obvious false reports, but no systematic effort to document patterns or implement consequences for abuse of emergency services. Officer Martinez had written to his supervisor in June. Morrison calls are becoming routine burdens on patrol resources. Obvious racial bias pattern emerging. Request guidance on response protocols and potential intervention strategies. The supervisor's reply: continue standard response procedures. Document everything thoroughly. CYA protocol in effect. Detective Rodriguez had flagged Morrison's address in the computer system with a detailed note. Frequent caller with pattern of unsubstantiated claims. Often involves families of color engaging in normal activities. Exercise caution with response assumptions and document evidence thoroughly. But the warnings never translated into policy changes, supervisor training, or intervention strategies. The 911 dispatcher I spoke with yesterday told me they've been concerned about Morrison for 8 months, Detective Carter reported. Multiple dispatchers have discussed flagging her calls for automatic supervisor review, but current department policy requires standard emergency response to all reports, regardless of caller history or pattern recognition. Bobby studied the comprehensive timeline Detective Carter had constructed, mapping Morrison's calls against demographic changes in the Willow Creek subdivision. The correlation was undeniable and mathematically precise. As more families of color moved into the upscale neighborhood, Morrison's emergency calls increased proportionally while her language became increasingly inflammatory. January 2023, Willow Creek subdivision was roughly 78% white according to census updates. Morrison averaged 2 calls per month, Detective Carter explained, pointing to her statistical analysis complete with charts and demographic overlays. By December 2023, 62% white, due to an influx of professional families of color seeking quality schools and safe neighborhoods. Morrison's calls increased to 3.1 per month. By March 2024, 54% white as the neighborhood's reputation for good schools attracted diverse families. Her calls peaked at 4.2 per month, with increasingly specific allegations of drug dealing, gang activity, and threats to community safety that required SWAT consultation on 2 occasions. The data revealed Morrison's 911 calls as a systematic campaign of harassment designed to make families of color feel unwelcome in their own neighborhood through repeated police contact. Each false report represented an attempt to criminalize ordinary existence, transforming birthday parties into drug deals and family gatherings into gang activity through the weaponization of law enforcement bias. Have any of the families filed formal complaints about repeated police contact? Bobby asked, dreading the answer. Detective Carter opened a supplementary folder thick with documentation. 6 families have contacted our community liaison officer about feeling systematically targeted. The Johnson family moved away last September, citing constant police harassment and feeling like criminals in our own home as primary factors in their decision to relocate to a different school district. Mrs. Martinez told Officer Rodriguez that her children now panic whenever they hear sirens anywhere in the neighborhood. Her 8-year-old son asks if they're in trouble every time a police car drives down their street. The family has stopped hosting gatherings entirely. The Park family, Detective Park's relatives who moved here from California, stopped hosting family gatherings after 3 Morrison-generated police visits in 2 months. They told responding officers they felt like suspects under surveillance in their own backyard. Bobby absorbed the systematic nature of the harassment with growing anger that threatened his professional composure. Morrison had weaponized his department against innocent families, transforming police officers into unwitting agents of racial intimidation. Every response validated her complaints. Every investigation legitimized her suspicions. Every police visit reinforced her neighbors' sense that they were perpetually suspect in their own community. "What's our legal exposure?" Bobby asked, his mind shifting to institutional liability and potential federal litigation. "Significant and multifaceted," Detective Carter admitted, consulting legal research she'd compiled. "Civil rights violations under Section 1983, selective enforcement patterns, institutional racism facilitated by official policy. Any of these families could have viable federal lawsuits against the department, the city, and potentially individual officers." Morrison's false reports meet Texas criteria for criminal charges, including abuse of emergency services, filing false police reports, and harassment, but prosecuting her might require admitting our pattern of enabling racial harassment. The irony wasn't lost on Bobby. Prosecuting Morrison for abusing the system might require acknowledging that his department had enabled that abuse through passive complicity and administrative indifference to obvious patterns of racial bias. Detective Carter pulled out her final piece of evidence. Screenshots from a private neighborhood social media group where Morrison had posted extensively about maintaining community standards and protecting property values from certain demographics that don't understand suburban culture. The posts revealed explicit racial language that contextualized her 911 calls as part of a broader campaign to exclude families of color from Willow Creek. "She's been organizing other residents for months," Detective Carter explained, "building support for increased police presence, stricter noise ordinances specifically targeting urban music, and HOA policies that disproportionately impact multicultural families. She's created an echo chamber of residents who view diversity as a threat to property values." Saturday's incident wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of an 18-month campaign of systematic harassment that we inadvertently facilitated through bureaucratic blindness to racial patterns. Bobby stood and walked to his office window, looking out at the city he'd sworn to protect and serve. The weight of institutional failure pressed down on him like a physical burden that threatened to crush everything he'd believed about law enforcement integrity. His department had become an instrument of harassment against the very communities they were meant to protect, and his own family had finally become targets of the system he led. "Recommendations?" he asked without turning around, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone contemplating career-ending revelations. Complete policy review of response protocols for frequent callers with bias pattern recognition. Mandatory bias training for all officers, dispatchers, and supervisors. Community liaison meetings with affected families to rebuild trust. And criminal charges against Morrison for false reporting, harassment, and systematic abuse of emergency services. Detective Carter paused, then added the most difficult recommendation. And a federal civil rights investigation of our department's practices. We need external review to rebuild community trust and ensure this never happens again. Bobby turned back to face the evidence sprawled across his conference table, documentation of systematic racism operating under the guise of law enforcement, enabled by bureaucratic indifference and institutional blind spots that allowed bias to flourish unchecked. Saturday's viral incident had exposed a pattern of harassment that demanded more than administrative response. It required fundamental reckoning with how police power could be weaponized against innocent families. Draw up a complete report, Bobby instructed. I want every incident documented, every pattern identified, every institutional failure acknowledged. We're briefing the mayor this afternoon, and I'm calling the FBI Civil Rights Division myself. The call from Mrs. Carter came at 9:47 a.m. on Tuesday, her elderly voice trembling with determination as she spoke to Detective Sarah Carter. No relation, but connected now by shared purpose and mounting evidence. I have something the chief needs to see, something I've been saving for the right moment. By 10:30 a.m., Bobby Williams sat in Mrs. Carter's immaculate living room, surrounded by evidence that would transform his investigation from departmental review into federal case study. The 83-year-old retired librarian had spent 18 months documenting Linda Morrison's harassment campaign, with the methodical precision of someone who understood that truth required documentation. I started recording after the third time police came to my neighbors' houses for birthday parties, Mrs. Carter explained, her weathered hands steady as she operated a tablet with surprising technological fluency. My late husband always said that silence enables evil, so I decided to stop being silent. The tablet revealed a treasure trove of evidence that no official investigation could have uncovered. Ring doorbell footage from Mrs. Carter's front door captured Linda Morrison's behavior with devastating clarity. Hours of surveillance disguised as gardening, photographing license plates of guests at multicultural gatherings, and timing her 911 calls to coincide with peak family activity periods. May 15th, the Rodriguez graduation party, Mrs. Carter narrated as video played on her tablet screen. Watch Linda position herself at her mailbox at exactly 3:47 p.m. when the mariachi band was setting up. She makes the call at 3:52 p.m., claiming the music is too loud, but the band hasn't even started playing yet. Bobby watched Linda Morrison stage her complaints with calculated precision, timing her calls to maximize police response during family celebrations. The footage revealed premeditation that elevated her harassment from impulsive racism to systematic persecution. July 4th, the Park family barbecue, Mrs. Carter continued. Linda calls 911 at 2:15 p.m., claiming gang activity and possible weapons. But look at the timestamp. This is 30 minutes before Detective Park's family even arrives. She's calling about activities that haven't happened yet. Detective Sarah Carter took notes with growing amazement as Mrs. Carter's archive revealed the depth of Linda Morrison's deception. Each video contradicted official 911 transcripts, exposing false claims, manufactured evidence, and deliberate timing designed to weaponize police responses against innocent families. The most disturbing incident was October 12th, Mrs. Carter said, her voice hardening with controlled anger. The Thompson family's son came home from college with friends for his birthday. Linda called 911 claiming she witnessed drug dealing, but my camera shows her making the call from inside her house while looking at printed photographs of the young men arriving. Printed photographs? Bobby asked, though he suspected the answer would reveal stalking behavior. She's been photographing every person of color who visits the neighborhood, Mrs. Carter confirmed with disgust. Printing the photos, organizing them in what appears to be surveillance files, my camera caught her consulting these photos before making specific identification claims to 911 operators. The evidence painted Linda Morrison not as a concerned neighbor making impulsive complaints, but as someone conducting systematic surveillance and building case files against families of color. Her 911 calls weren't reactive. They were planned operations designed to generate maximum police harassment. Mrs. Carter opened a folder containing printed screenshots from neighborhood social media groups, revealing Morrison's efforts to recruit other residents into her harassment campaign. She convinced the Hendersons at 251 Oak to start calling about the Martinez family's work trucks, Mrs. Carter explained, and she got Mrs. Patterson to report the Lee family's teenage son for loitering when he waits for the school bus in his own driveway. Detective Carter recognized the addresses from complaint logs she'd reviewed. "Chief, this explains the secondary pattern we found. Other residents making Morrison-style complaints about the same families. She's been coordinating a harassment network." At 11:15 a.m., Mrs. Carter revealed her most damaging evidence: audio recordings captured by her security system of Linda Morrison coaching other neighbors on effective complaint language. "Listen to this conversation from September," she said, playing audio of Morrison instructing Mrs. Patterson. "You can't just say they're loud," Morrison's voice explained with tutorial precision. "You have to mention specific violations, noise ordinances, parking restrictions, potential drug activity. The key is using words that force police response." "But what if there's no actual drug activity?" Mrs. Patterson asked nervously. "There doesn't need to be," Morrison replied with chilling confidence. "By the time police investigate and find nothing, the message is sent. These people will know they're being watched." Bobby felt his stomach turn as he listened to Morrison describe police officers as tools in her harassment campaign, deliberately misusing emergency services to intimidate families through repeated contact with law enforcement. By noon, word had spread through the department that Mrs. Carter possessed evidence that would redefine their understanding of the Morrison case. Officer Martinez arrived with his own documentation. Personal notes from Morrison-generated calls that revealed her escalating demands for aggressive police response. "She started questioning why we weren't making arrests after every call," Martinez reported. "After the fifth or sixth call, where we found no criminal activity, she began demanding to speak with supervisors about our failure to protect the community from obvious threats." When I responded to the Park family barbecue in July, Morrison approached me afterward claiming I was obviously compromised because I didn't make any arrests. She said Detective Park's family probably threatened me into compliance with their criminal organization. Officer Rodriguez arrived with additional testimony that revealed Morrison's attempts to manipulate police procedures. She started timing her calls to coincide with shift changes, hoping different officers wouldn't recognize the pattern. She also began making complaints about our inadequate response to previous calls, trying to escalate investigations into SWAT situations. The pattern extended beyond false reporting into sophisticated manipulation of law enforcement protocols, demonstrating Morrison's understanding of how to weaponize police procedures against targeted families. At 1:15 p.m., Detective Park arrived with documentation his family had maintained throughout their harassment ordeal. His relatives had created detailed records of police contacts, noting dates, officers' names, and Morrison's behavior during each incident. "My uncle started documenting after the third police visit," Detective Park explained, spreading photographs across Mrs. Carter's coffee table. As a retired federal employee, he understood the importance of creating an evidence trail. They have photographs of Morrison watching their house from her yard, timing their activities and celebrating when police cars arrived. "Celebrating?" Bobby asked, though the answer would confirm his worst suspicions. "My aunt photographed Morrison clapping and smiling from her window while officers questioned my teenage cousins about suspicious gathering that was actually a study group for AP Physics. She was clearly enjoying the harassment she'd orchestrated." The documentation revealed Morrison's emotional satisfaction with successful police harassment, transforming law enforcement from protective service into personal entertainment and weapons against neighbors whose existence challenged her racial comfort zone. At 2:30 p.m., the investigation expanded when the Johnson family, who had moved away after repeated police contact, drove from their new home in Austin to provide comprehensive testimony about their harassment experience. "We kept every incident report, every business card, every photograph of police cars in our driveway," Mrs. Johnson explained, setting a thick folder on Mrs. Carter's dining table. Our children developed anxiety disorders from constant police questioning at family gatherings. Our 8-year-old still asks if we're going to jail every time he sees a police car. Linda Morrison made our lives a nightmare for 6 months, Mr. Johnson added, his voice carrying barely controlled anger. Police visits during our son's birthday party, during my wife's book club meeting, during my mother's funeral reception. Every significant moment in our family life was interrupted by investigating officers responding to her deliberate lies. Their documentation included dozens of photographs showing police cars in their driveway, complete incident report numbers, and a detailed timeline that correlated Morrison's calls with major family events, graduations, birthdays, religious holidays, and even a funeral gathering. The final straw was when she called 911 during my mother's funeral reception, claiming we were conducting illegal gambling because family members were playing cards to distract children from grief. Mrs. Johnson continued. Officers arrived while we were still in mourning clothes, questioning elderly relatives about suspected criminal activity while we were processing the loss of our family matriarch. At 3:45 p.m., Detective Carter's computer investigation revealed Morrison's employment history with Integrity Insurance and a pattern of professional discrimination that contextualized her residential harassment campaign. Chief Morrison was investigated by the Texas Department of Insurance last year for filing suspicious claims patterns, Detective Carter reported. Multiple complaints documented her systematically denying claims from minority policyholders while approving identical claims from white clients. The investigation found statistical evidence of racial bias in her professional decision-making, but she received only a written reprimand and mandatory diversity training. Her supervisor described the behavior as concerning but not criminal enough for termination. The discovery revealed Morrison's bias as systematic rather than situational, extending from her professional discrimination into her residential harassment campaign. Her 911 abuse represented one facet of a broader pattern of using institutional power to discriminate against people of color in multiple spheres of her life. At 4:15 p.m., Mrs. Carter provided her most shocking revelation: recorded evidence of Morrison coordinating with other residents to create false narratives that would justify increased police presence in the neighborhood. She organized what she called community safety meetings at her house, Mrs. Carter explained, playing audio from one such gathering. Listen to how she coaches neighbors to manufacture crime statistics that would support their complaints. Morrison's voice on the recording demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of how to manipulate official statistics. If we all report the same incidents from different angles, it creates a pattern that police have to take seriously. One noise complaint gets ignored, but 5 noise complaints about the same family forces investigation. By 5 p.m., Bobby's investigation had accumulated overwhelming evidence of systematic harassment that transcended individual racism into organized conspiracy to violate civil rights through abuse of government services. Video evidence, audio recordings, witness testimonies, and professional discrimination history combined to create a federal case that implicated not just Morrison but potentially other residents and institutional systems that enabled her campaign. Mrs. Carter, who had quietly observed the afternoon's evidence compilation, finally spoke with the moral authority of someone who had witnessed decades of social progress and regression. Chief Williams, the evidence speaks clearly about Linda Morrison's guilt. But what matters now is whether your department will use this truth to create lasting change or simply prosecute one racist neighbor while ignoring the systems that enabled her to weaponize your officers against innocent families. Her question hung in the air like a moral challenge, demanding more than criminal justice, requiring institutional transformation that would prevent future Morrison-style harassment while rebuilding trust with communities that had experienced police power as oppression rather than protection. The Willow Creek Community Center had never hosted a press conference that attracted national media attention, but by 2 p.m. on Wednesday, satellite trucks lined the parking lot like an invasion force documenting democracy in action. Chief Bobby Williams stood behind the podium, his dress uniform bearing the weight of 22 years in law enforcement and the moral authority of someone who had become an unwitting symbol of justice confronting systematic racism. The packed auditorium buzzed with anticipation as reporters, community members, civil rights activists, and curious residents filled every available seat. Camera crews positioned themselves for optimal angles while photographers captured images that would define how this story entered the permanent record of American racial reckoning. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and local stations had deployed their most experienced correspondents, recognizing that this small suburban drama contained elements of a much larger national conversation about bias, authority, and institutional accountability. Bobby surveyed the crowd with the calm assessment of someone who understood that his next words would determine whether his community moved toward healing or deeper division. Maria Williams sat in the front row with 8-year-old Zoe, whose presence served as a reminder that this fight was ultimately about creating a world where children could celebrate birthdays without harassment. Behind them sat Detective Park's family, the Johnson family who had driven from Austin, the Martinez family, and other residents whose lives had been disrupted by Linda Morrison's systematic campaign of racial harassment. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming," Bobby began, his voice carrying across the auditorium with quiet authority that immediately silenced the crowd. "I stand before you today not just as police chief of Willow Creek, but as a father whose daughter's 8th birthday party became a symbol of systematic harassment that has plagued our community for 18 months. The room fell silent with the expectation that comes when truth is about to confront comfortable lies that have enabled injustice to flourish unchecked. Over the past 3 days, our investigation has uncovered evidence of systematic abuse of emergency services designed to harass families of color in the Willow Creek subdivision. What began as isolated incidents has revealed itself as an organized campaign of racial intimidation conducted through deliberate manipulation of law enforcement protocols." Bobby gestured to Detective Sarah Carter, who activated a large screen displaying statistical analysis that transformed individual incidents into undeniable patterns of discrimination. Charts, graphs, and timelines revealed the mathematical precision of Linda Morrison's targeting strategy with devastating clarity. Linda Morrison made 47,911 calls over 18 months. 47 calls targeting exclusively families of color for engaging in ordinary activities that white families conduct without police contact. Birthday parties became suspected drug operations. Graduation celebrations became gang gatherings. Children playing basketball became criminal conspiracies. The audience stirred as the scope of Morrison's harassment campaign became clear through data that revealed systematic rather than random targeting. Reporters scribbled notes while residents who had wondered about frequent police presence in their neighborhood finally understood the manufactured nature of the emergency responses. "But this investigation has forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth," Bobby continued, his voice hardening with institutional accountability that would make headlines across the nation. "Linda Morrison could not have conducted this harassment campaign without the inadvertent cooperation of the Willow Creek Police Department. Every false report we investigated validated her complaints. Every response we made to her manufactured emergencies enabled further harassment of innocent families." Municipal officials in the audience shifted uncomfortably as Bobby acknowledged institutional complicity that exposed the city to federal litigation and civil rights violations. Mayor Patricia Hendricks looked visibly pale as she realized the legal and political implications of systematic police harassment enabled through administrative blindness to obvious patterns. "We responded to every call because our protocols demanded response regardless of caller history. We investigated every allegation because our training emphasized thoroughness over pattern recognition. We documented every incident without recognizing that documentation itself had become a weapon of harassment." The statistical presentation continued, revealing the mathematical precision of Morrison's discrimination. 0 calls about white families despite significantly higher rates of actual noise violations and parking infractions, confirmed through independent analysis of city code enforcement records that documented objective violations by demographic distribution. The evidence we've compiled includes video recordings of Miss Morrison staging complaints before activities occurred, audio recordings of her coaching other residents to manufacture criminal allegations, and testimony from multiple families who were driven from their homes by systematic police harassment disguised as community safety concerns. Bobby paused, allowing the weight of systematic persecution to settle on the audience before delivering his most damning revelation about the premeditated nature of Morrison's campaign. Miss Morrison maintained surveillance files on every person of color who visited our neighborhood. She photographed license plates, documented family gatherings, timed her 911 calls to disrupt significant life events, birthday parties, graduations, religious celebrations, and even funeral receptions. This was not impulsive bias. This was calculated psychological warfare. Gasps echoed through the auditorium as the premeditated nature of Morrison's harassment became clear. Several community members who had assumed her complaints were legitimate reactions to neighborhood changes now understood they had witnessed systematic stalking and harassment disguised as community concern. The Johnson family moved away after 6 months of harassment that included police visits during their son's birthday party, their grandmother's funeral reception, and their daughter's high school graduation celebration. The Park family stopped hosting gatherings entirely after repeated investigations of their study groups and family barbecues. Multiple families report that their children now experience anxiety disorders triggered by police sirens. Detective Carter advanced the presentation to display Mrs. Carter's video evidence, showing Morrison celebrating successful police harassment from her window while officers questioned children about imaginary crimes. The footage sparked audible reactions of disgust from audience members who witnessed Morrison's satisfaction with the suffering she'd orchestrated. "This is not about one woman's prejudice," Bobby declared, his voice rising with moral conviction that would be quoted in news reports for weeks. "This is about how institutional systems can be weaponized to perpetuate discrimination when we fail to recognize obvious patterns of abuse. This is about how good people's silence enables evil to flourish in spaces designed for community safety." The audience included several affected families who had returned to provide testimony about their harassment experiences. Bobby gestured for them to join him at the podium, creating a visual representation of community solidarity that transformed individual persecution into collective resistance against systematic discrimination. "Mrs. Johnson, would you please tell our community about your family's experience with systematic harassment?" Mrs. Johnson approached the microphone with the dignity of someone who had endured persecution and emerged with determination to prevent others from suffering similar treatment. Her voice trembled initially but gained strength as she described 18 months of psychological warfare disguised as community policing. "For 6 months, Linda Morrison made our family feel like criminals in our own home. Every celebration, every gathering, every moment of joy was interrupted by police officers responding to her lies about our activities. Our children learned to associate family happiness with police investigation. Our 8-year-old son developed anxiety so severe that he hides under his bed when he hears sirens anywhere in the neighborhood. Our teenage daughter stopped inviting friends over because she was embarrassed by constant police questioning about normal teenage activities. We moved away not because we couldn't afford our mortgage, but because we couldn't afford the psychological damage to our children's sense of safety and belonging." Mr. Martinez stepped forward to describe how Morrison's campaign had affected his family's cultural celebrations and sense of belonging in their own community. "She called the police during our daughter's quinceañera, claiming we were conducting illegal gambling because relatives were playing cards to entertain children during the ceremony. Officers arrived during our family celebration, questioning elderly grandparents about suspected criminal activity while we were celebrating our daughter's 15th birthday. When my wife tried to explain that quinceañeras are traditional celebrations honoring young women's transition to adulthood, Miss Morrison shouted from across the street that we were lying to cover up gang initiation rituals. Our daughter's special day, a celebration she had planned for 2 years, became a nightmare of interrogation and humiliation that she still has trouble discussing." Detective Park provided a law enforcement perspective on how Morrison's systematic false reporting had compromised police credibility within the community and damaged relationships between officers and residents they were sworn to protect. As both a resident and an officer, I witnessed how Miss Morrison's harassment campaign damaged relationships between police and community members. Families who should view officers as protectors began seeing us as tools of harassment. My own relatives stopped calling police about actual security concerns because they feared being treated as suspects rather than victims. When institutional authority becomes a weapon of discrimination, everyone's safety suffers. Community policing depends on trust, and systematic harassment destroys that trust in ways that take years to rebuild. Bobby returned to the podium as community testimony concluded, his expression reflecting the gravity of institutional reckoning that demanded more than individual accountability. It required systematic reform that would prevent future abuse of police authority. The evidence we've compiled has been forwarded to the Federal Bureau of Investigation Civil Rights Division and the United States Attorney's Office for review of potential hate crime charges and civil rights violations. Ms. Morrison's abuse of emergency services meets federal criteria for conspiracy to violate civil rights through government agency manipulation. But criminal prosecution alone cannot repair the damage done to community trust or prevent similar harassment campaigns in the future. Therefore, effective immediately, the Willow Creek Police Department is implementing comprehensive policy reforms designed to recognize and prevent bias-motivated false reporting. The policy announcements that followed represented fundamental changes to law enforcement protocols that would serve as a model for departments nationwide: mandatory pattern recognition training for all officers and dispatchers, automatic supervisor review for repeat callers with bias indicators, community bias reporting mechanisms with direct access to federal oversight, and partnership with civil rights organizations to monitor discriminatory practices in real time. We are also establishing a community oversight board with authority to review police responses to bias complaints and recommend policy changes that protect all residents equally, Bobby continued. The families who suffered harassment under our watch will have direct input into reforms designed to prevent future abuse of law enforcement authority. The most significant announcement came last, representing unprecedented accountability for a suburban police department. The Willow Creek Police Department is requesting voluntary federal oversight of our practices and procedures to ensure that institutional changes create lasting protection against discriminatory harassment. We cannot rebuild community trust without external accountability and transparent reform processes. As Bobby's presentation concluded, reporters began shouting questions, but he raised his hand for silence before delivering his final message directly to the cameras that would carry his words far beyond Willow Creek. My daughter asked me why the mean lady across the street hated her for her skin color. I explained that some people carry poison in their hearts, but that doesn't make the poison acceptable or inevitable. Communities have choices about whether they tolerate discrimination or demand justice. We can choose silence that enables evil or courage that transforms communities. He looked directly at the cameras. Linda Morrison's harassment campaign succeeded for 18 months because good people remained silent while their neighbors suffered persecution. But silence is also a choice, and today we choose to speak truth that demands justice. We cannot undo the damage caused by systematic harassment, but we can ensure that it never happens again. We can choose to build a community where every family feels safe celebrating life's precious moments without fear that their joy will be criminalized by neighbors who cannot accept their existence. The 20 seconds of absolute silence that followed Bobby's closing words created a moment of collective reflection that photographers captured as a symbol of community pause before moral awakening and commitment to change. When applause finally erupted, it began with the affected families and spread throughout the auditorium like a wave of solidarity that transcended racial lines and embraced shared humanity over tribal prejudice. 6 months later, the afternoon sun cast golden light across Maple Drive as children's laughter echoed from the Williams family backyard once again. But this time, the celebration carried deeper meaning. It was the first annual Unity Day, born from the ashes of hatred and transformed into a symbol of community healing that drew families from across Willow Creek and beyond. Chief Bobby Williams stood at the same grill where Linda Morrison's harassment campaign had reached its explosive conclusion, but now he wore civilian clothes and a smile that reflected hard-won peace. The backyard that had become a battleground for racial justice now hosted representatives from 12 different cultures, their children playing together with the unconscious ease that adults spend years trying to reclaim. Zoe Williams, now 9 years old and slightly taller, moved between groups of children with the natural leadership skills that suggested she might follow her father into public service someday. Her birthday crown from 6 months ago had been replaced by a Unity Day badge that she wore with the pride of someone who understood that her birthday party had changed more than just her family's life. "Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez brought the mariachi band again," Zoe announced, tugging on Bobby's sleeve with infectious enthusiasm. "And the Park family is teaching everyone to make Korean tacos." The cultural fusion represented everything Linda Morrison had tried to prevent. A neighborhood where diversity wasn't just tolerated but celebrated, where different traditions enriched community life rather than threatening imaginary property values. Across the street, 247 Maple Drive stood empty, its for sale sign bearing the weight of Morrison's legal consequences. Federal hate crime charges had resulted in 2 years of federal probation, community service requirements, and civil restitution payments that would continue for the next decade. Her insurance career had ended permanently after Texas Department of Insurance revoked her license for discriminatory practices that extended beyond residential harassment into professional misconduct. More importantly, her systematic abuse of emergency services had sparked legislative reforms that made bias-motivated false reporting a felony offense throughout Texas, with Linda Morrison's case serving as the primary example in training materials for police departments statewide. Detective Sarah Carter arrived with her own family, carrying a folder of updates that transformed individual accountability into systematic reform. "Chief, the FBI released their preliminary findings on our federal oversight review," she reported, setting the folder on a picnic table decorated with flags from every nation represented in Willow Creek. "Complete vindication of our reform protocols," she continued with satisfaction. "Zero complaints of bias-motivated harassment since implementation. Community trust surveys show 89% confidence in police fairness, up from 34% before the Morrison incident." The statistics reflected more than policy changes. They documented cultural transformation that had rippled far beyond one suburban neighborhood. Bobby's press conference had inspired similar reforms in departments across Texas and neighboring states, while his voluntary request for federal oversight had become a model for police accountability nationwide. Mrs. Carter, now 84 and moving with careful deliberation, approached Bobby with a wrapped gift that carried symbolic weight beyond its modest appearance. "Chief Williams, this is for Zoe," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who had witnessed evil transform into justice through community courage. "It's a photo album documenting how our neighborhood has changed since your family stood up to hatred. Every family celebration, every new resident welcome party, every moment of joy that Linda Morrison tried to destroy, all preserved as evidence that love defeats fear when good people refuse to remain silent." Bobby accepted the gift with the reverence it deserved, understanding that Mrs. Carter had continued her documentation project but shifted focus from recording harassment to preserving healing. Her photographs would serve as testament to community resilience that overcame systematic persecution through collective action and institutional reform. The Johnson family had returned from Austin for Unity Day, their presence representing healing that transcended geographical relocation. Their 8-year-old son, who had developed anxiety disorders from Morrison's harassment, now played freely with other children without showing signs of police-related trauma that had once defined his daily experience. "We're considering moving back," Mrs. Johnson told Bobby as they watched their son demonstrate his recovery through uninhibited play. "The community changes you've implemented make us feel safe in ways we never expected after what we endured." Their potential return represented the ultimate vindication of Bobby's reform efforts. Families driven away by systematic harassment now felt confident enough to rebuild lives in the same community where they had suffered persecution. Detective Park supervised a group of teenagers setting up tables for the evening's cultural food festival, their easy cooperation representing the integration that Morrison had tried to prevent through manufactured police harassment. His own family had moved back to Willow Creek after briefly relocating to avoid continued targeting, their return symbolizing community commitment to ensuring that justice produced lasting change. "The kids don't remember why police used to come to our barbecues," Detective Park observed, watching teenagers from different ethnic backgrounds collaborate on party preparations with natural camaraderie. To them, officers are neighbors who help with community events rather than investigators responding to false emergencies. the generational healing represented Bobby's greatest achievement, creating conditions where children could form friendships without the baggage of their parents' struggles against systematic racism. As afternoon shifted toward evening, Bobby gathered the assembled families for the Unity Day tradition that had emerged from tragedy. A moment of silence honoring the courage required to confront hatred, followed by shared commitment to protecting community values that celebrated rather than criminalized difference. 6 months ago, my daughter's birthday party became a symbol of how fear can weaponize institutions against innocent families. Bobby addressed the gathered crowd, his voice carrying the authority that had transformed personal persecution into community catalyst for change. Today we celebrate proof that communities can choose healing over hatred, justice over prejudice, and courage over the comfortable silence that enables evil to flourish unchecked. The moment of silence that followed carried different weight than the shocked pause after his press conference. This silence reflected collective gratitude for transformation achieved through individual courage, multiplied by community support. When the silence ended, children's laughter resumed with renewed energy while adults continued conversations that spanned languages, cultures, and the shared understanding that diversity strengthened rather than threatened their neighborhood's character. As evening approached and families began gathering their children for bedtime routines, Bobby stood in his driveway looking at the community that had emerged from systematic harassment. The Unity Day celebration had demonstrated possibilities that extended beyond his family's personal vindication. It had proven that institutional change could create lasting protection for vulnerable communities. Maria Williams joined him in the gathering twilight, their shared silence reflecting the peace that comes from fighting good fights and achieving meaningful victories. "Think it will last?" she asked, voicing the question that haunted every hard-won social progress. Bobby considered the policy changes, federal oversight, community engagement, and most importantly, the children playing together without consciousness of the racial barriers that had once divided their parents. "It has to," he answered with conviction born of experience. "Because silence enabled Morrison's harassment to flourish, and our voices created the change that stopped it." As stars appeared above Willow Creek, Bobby Williams understood that his family's ordeal had produced something precious, evidence that ordinary people could confront systematic injustice and win not just individual vindication, but lasting institutional change that protected future generations from similar persecution. The uniform hanging in his garage remained ready for duty, but tonight it represented service to a community that had chosen justice over comfortable prejudice, and made that choice permanent through courage that transformed harassment into healing. This story shows that change is possible when communities choose courage over silence. Have you witnessed bias in your neighborhood? Share your experiences in the comments. Like this video if you believe communities can heal from systematic racism. Subscribe for more stories of justice overcoming prejudice. Most importantly, what will you do when you see injustice in your own community? The choice between silence and action defines whether hatred flourishes or healing begins.